we've got a really, really special guest today. I'm so excited that we are joined by Andrew Xeni here. Andrew is our special guest to talk all about digital product passports, what they are and how they're going to affect your product business. So you probably may know Andrew. You probably know him as the founder of the award-winning fashion brand Nobody's Child. Did you also know that he is also from a manufacturing background as well, which is really exciting, obviously from my perspective, having built up his family business, manufacturing business to supply the UK high street. Andrew's also the CEO of Fabacus, which is a platform, a technology company and a platform which offers a digital solution to create your digital product passports, as well as the chairman of Soreto. So Andrew today is going to be doing a short presentation, and then that's going to be followed by a Q&A session at the end. We've set aside an hour for this, so there's going to be lots of time for your questions. Please put your questions in the chat for him as you go along. But we're also joined today by Jamie Beck and Alexandra Wilson from Fabacus and Esme Smith from Nobody's Child. Hello, guys, who will be helping to answer your questions in the chat as we go along. So just keep those questions coming, okay? Right, now with no further ado, though, I want to hand over to Andrew. Andrew, thank you so much for joining us today. Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Kate, and good morning to everybody. I'll set the scene first. That whilst I am known as the founder of the three businesses, it's self-inflicted pain. It wasn't just I woke up one day and decided to try and take over the world. It was a background in manufacturing that, thankfully, very humble beginnings for our family. My parents had a small CMT factory in North London, like a lot of Greek immigrants back in the day. And me and my brother decided to try and get into manufacturing, which we built a manufacturing business supplying a lot of the big UK high street retailers with sort of women's wear, jersey and woven apparel. And then about 10 years ago, I decided I'm going to pursue my passion and ambition in technology. And I started Fabacus, a little bit of a sandbox for me to learn the ropes. And then my brother said, "You seem to be good at this tech stuff. How hard is it to have a website?" And Nobody's Child was born. So very naive, clearly, at what it would take to build a brand, B, a digital brand. And of course, thankfully, when you plant these little acorns, you have no idea what's going to happen. But slowly and surely, through a lot of grit, perseverance, and capital, we've started to look and feel like oak trees, which is amazing. So very proud of how far we've come. We're very far from where we want to be, but we're definitely very proud of what we're doing along the way. So I find myself as the founder of those three businesses. I operate as CEO day to day of Fabacus. I have an incredible CEO, Jodie, that runs Nobody's Child for me. And of course, I work very closely with her in capacity of owner and chairman. And we sold a third of that business to Marks and Spencer's, which is in the public domain. So we have an incredible blue chip retailer on our cap table. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a second. So today we're going to talk about digital product passports. I'm going to talk you through a little bit about how I've ended up here and how digital product passports feature in my ecosystem and how the stars aligned for two of my businesses to collaborate and really pioneer this, which is something I am particularly proud of, given the ultimate objective of what digital product passports stand for. So we've got a few slides. I'm going to try and work through them at pace. I'm not a big one for presentations. I prefer to get into the Q&A with you all and give you an opportunity to ask us what our experiences are. Of course, I've been joined by my experts in the team who know a lot more than I do. They're in the weeds all day, every day. So Jamie and Ali, as Kate mentioned, from the Fabacus side, who are working with a whole array of retailers and brands, some of the largest in the world, that we're thankful and grateful enough to work with. And of course, Nobody's Child, which prides itself on its responsible credentials. We've got Esme joining, who's been working through the pain over the last 3 years of implementing digital product passports across all of our products today, and something that we want to continue to scale across the business as we continue to, God willing, grow. So Nobody's Child started off, we celebrated our 10-year birthday in October last year. It was a lovely milestone for us. It's been an incredibly tough journey. I know retail in general has, of course, for most people, but for a pure play that started off life as a value brand, we certainly picked our battles. And what we had to work really hard on since bringing in the team and basically partnering with M&S. The logic there, of course, was a very straightforward one. They had 30 million plus customers. At the time, we had about 180,000. So it was very much about leveraging reach, and we needed reach or capital. It didn't matter which, because capital was only going to ultimately be spent on reach anyway. So thankfully, that partnership has really helped us grow significantly over the last 5 years. And more to the point, where we can see here some of the accolades. Incredibly proud to have won Retailer of the Year for under 100 million in turnover for the last 3 consecutive years, which we understand no one's done before. So it's an amazing achievement and lovely recognition for the team. And we've been building that business obviously from the ground up. The challenges we faced into is we started life very much aspiring to be a responsible value fashion brand, but that just wasn't viable. So we spent the last 5 years elevating the brand to warrant a bit more of a premium positioning, a better price point to make the business viable, but very much staying very true to our responsible sort of DNA. We use the word responsible because I personally don't believe that you can claim to be sustainable and in fashion. I think it's a little bit of a contradiction, but we are responsible, and we source the best materials that we can, and everything that's done within the business and throughout and in our supply chains is done through a very conscious lens. And the team work very hard at that. They do a lot of stuff that is beyond our wildest expectations. When we started this business, it was very much with an ambition to be ethical. It was something that was close to our heart. We owned our own factories. We had a vested interest in our own knitting, dyeing, and printing facilities. So we understand the value chain for fashion intimately and the process. And we were very passionate and proud of the fact that everybody in our supply chains was, of course, looked after, protected, and fully paid, versus some of the other practices that we were aware of around us from other retailers and brands. And that was pretty much what we wanted to achieve with Nobody's Child, is to be a very responsible but affordable brand. And then, of course, we slowly started to source better fabrics with all the right accreditations, and recycled fabrics, and then that just evolved. And today it's incredible how far the team have brought that. And whilst I can take a bit of pride in getting the party started, I certainly don't deserve the recognition for where we've got to. That's a team effort. They've been amazing at getting us this far. And Fabacus, Fabacus was an interesting ambition. When I started that, the objective was to really help brands and retailers achieve full visibility and traceability in their supply chains, albeit back then it was through the lens of a commercial benefit, having full control, being able to source aggregated buying power, etc., etc. And that was born from the fact that we were working and supplying some of the biggest retailers. And I just thought to myself, wouldn't it be amazing if we could help these retailers achieve a level of visibility and control that could really get them to perform better? And we were thankful and grateful enough as a manufacturing business to grow that business significantly because of the way in which we operated back then. And I just wanted to productize it through technology. So I started to build a data aggregation platform, which essentially was a software solution for sitting independent from anything else that existed, but it would capture the right data at the right time from the right systems and the right stakeholders to create a trusted data set that would allow for this visibility. But then I discovered the licensing industry. By luck, over a coffee vending machine, I met somebody who was head of a transformation initiative at Disney at the time, who educated me over a coffee that these big top tier licensors, IP owners globally, if you ask them at any given point to give you a list of all of their products globally, they can't. And in their defense, it's because they don't make them. They license that IP, they work with third parties, some of the biggest retailers and manufacturers on the planet, to make their branded products and distribute and sell them. But the traditional licensing workflow was flawed in helping them achieve a level of visibility that they've never really needed. Licensing was always a high margin passive in the passive income industry or division of certain businesses. And so this wasn't a pressing need for them. So we decided to focus on that, and very grateful today to sit here and say that we represent industry critical mass globally. We work with some of the largest studios like Warner Discovery, Paramount, NBCUniversal, Hasbro, and others. And that's been a journey. and a very tough one, because we had to educate a $360 billion industry that there's a smarter way of working, but everybody needs to play nicely together so that we can drive standardization and get the big top tier licensees to come along for the journey, which thankfully they have. Now, of course, what happened along the way is we built this proprietary tech platform, and then the regulations started to bubble around 4 years ago, and the noise around digital product passports. And it transpired that everything that the passports command in terms of having structured, trusted data published to the public domain is exactly what our platform was developed to do, but for a different stakeholder. So what we ended up doing, thankfully, with nobody's charge sort of growth traction at that time and profile, and the privilege, of course, of being the owners, we decided to pioneer the digital product passport. We wanted to be one of the first brands to not only adopt it, but really overcook it through pride. And how can we put everything in the public domain to really give our customers a level of visibility and transparency that hasn't really been achieved at that scale and that complexity before. And of course, we had the platform, so we went on this journey. So now, what I'm presenting today is a combined effort between Fabacus and Nobody's Child, and we're going to talk a little bit about the journey and how far we've come, where we are today, and how we're helping many, many others do the same, to hopefully give you a bit of insight into what digital product passports are. So a little bit of background. There's an incoming regulation being led by the EU. There's always a misconception that this is an EU problem. It's not. It's anybody selling into the Eurozone that could be affected. And by default, the way I like to articulate it is, if you think about the way that GDPR was once developed, it was led by the EU, given the complexity, multiple countries, governments, languages, etc. And then the rest of the world created its own name for pretty much the same thing. And this is seemingly taking the same path. There are lots of different parts of the world developing their own framework for traceability, transparency, and sustainability. And even whilst things have changed a little bit in the US with the new administration, there are still pockets like the California state and New York that are still pursuing a framework around traceability and transparency. So this very much is a global problem that will need to be tackled and solved. And it's just being led by the EU, who have been very much at the heart of it for probably about 5 years now. So the framework been established around products having to have these digital product passports, starting with batteries and apparel. There's a whole roadmap leading through to 2030. So depending on which categories in which you operate, all of that regulation is slowly unfolding. That's not the only one. There's a whole load of other stuff that comes with that. So there's a load of other regulations being formed, again, different shapes and sizes. We've just highlighted some of the biggest ones here that are impacting the EU and the UK. But again, outside of this, if you think about what we're trying to achieve at Fabacus, is one of the things we recognized early on is that digital product passports are just one requirement, and that just is essentially a unique carrier on a product that will allow consumers to make an informed buying decision. But that has to come from a trusted, structured data set. So we call that a compliant catalog. So what we developed at Fabacus is a solution for retailers and brands to build their compliant catalog. So we give you the resource and the technology to operationalize that. So that allows us to work with you, your stakeholders, your partners, your internal systems and teams, to basically capture the right data at the right time to create this compliant catalog. But that catalog should be serving many different requirements, of which the passport is one. But some of these are all included to make sure that at entity level, you have a holistic view of all your products, what they're made of, where they come from, and anything associated to that product that is required to meet any other regulatory reporting, including packaging. We've been at it for about 3 years. We're on our 7th, I believe, maybe even now our 8th generation of the passport. And it's been lovely to see. Obviously, this is a huge undertaking by both teams. The Fabacus team trying to support NC, but NC, of course, doing all the heavy lifting and educating their supply base, their partners, of what data is needed, when and why, and making sure that we capture it in a trusted way and put it all onto our platform to create the compliant catalog, which ultimately delivers this passport. So we're going to talk through a passport in a moment. So I'm not going to exhaust that here, but it's just to give you a bit of comfort that we've had 3 years of pain and learning to get us this far, which has been incredible and great to see that now the team have achieved that maturity in operationalizing it in a much more automated way, where the suppliers have all been educated, onboarded, and now this is seemingly happening in a very nice and seamless way. Of course, it's still rough around the edges. We're polishing the diamond on the move. We're learning. The regulations are a moving target. Things are still being defined along the way. That we're expecting a big announcement next month from the EU regulators around what and why this information needs to be published. And so we just needed to make sure that we create a dynamic environment to accommodate whatever comes through. And that I can confidently say we've thankfully achieved, but not without its challenges. Very high level overview to give you guys a little bit of an overview of how we create the compliant catalog. In essence, we're capturing data from all of the different systems, some that are obviously within the Nobody's Child organization, and some which are partners, and of course the suppliers, and bringing it all into a structured and trusted format that allows us to publish that into the public domain. And on our platform, we allow the Nobody's Child team, of course, to curate and stage gate all of the raw data into something that they want to publish to create a really lovely branded experience. And we were very precious about that as a brand, because it's a touch point for a consumer, and it's not just about publishing a load of data that the consumer doesn't understand. It's about delivering it in a very tasteful way. So hopefully that will come through in the passport itself. So what I'm presenting here is a real passport. Any of you that are familiar with the brand or have ever engaged with one of our products or scanned one of our passports will get exactly what I'm presenting here. So this isn't jazz hands, this is a reflection of reality. So naturally, the first things we wanted to lead with are the product images, the composition and description of the product, because these are things that as consumers we are familiar with when we're shopping online. And so immediately this picture should reflect the product in your possession so that there's immediate comfort and trust being built. The next thing we go into is the traceability. So we, as a brand, have pushed the envelope. We've aspired for tier 5. In every product, we do multi-fiber traceability as well. So not just the main fabric, but if there's a lining and things like that. So we've really gone as far and as hard as we can. And again, we're continuing to improve as we go along. The regulations are talking about tier 1 and tier 2. And I know in previous discussions with Kate, one of the biggest concerns that keeps coming up is suppliers that are a bit concerned about what information is going to be published into the public domain, and will that expose your supplier base, which is your sort of proprietary relationships that you've built over the years. And the EU recognise this, so they're working on potentially having different data sets available for different stakeholders. So the customs may have access to a different data set than the consumers, even though they scan the 2 codes. And there are ways that they're structuring that. They haven't quite given us the full detail yet, but again, we provision for that to make sure that the brand owner is in full control of what information they have and what is published, the format, and who can see what. So we provision for that, but again, we're going to have to take the lead of the regulators as and when they come through. We talk about the factory here, obviously the country of origin, and the method of transport. All of these are data points ultimately that are needed to establish the environmental impact of the product too. So again, a little bit of an overview of some of the data that comes into the passport, but think of this as a compliant catalog. As a brand, you really should have everything related to that product in one place. So product testing, integrity, you could have all your supplier base completely mapped through. And at Fabacus, just to be clear, we don't try and do all of this stuff, right? So depending on the size and complexity of the brand, you may have a traceability partner. You'll certainly have a testing or audit partner. You will certainly have your own internal systems, whether it's a PLM or a PIM or an MDM or your own website that becomes your system of record. We just bring it all together and make sure that we capture the right data at the right time, which is also very important, because any of you in the manufacturing process operationally will appreciate that things change through the life cycle of a product between a design and what actually ends up going to market in terms of what material is finally used, what factory you ultimately use, etc., etc. So we need to make sure that when the passport's published into the public domain, everything incorporated is accurate and trusted. A little bit of a definition here of the different tiers, just to give you an idea of how we understand the supply chain and the way that we try to interpret it and publish it. Nothing really new here, but it's just to get us all aligned on the level of complexity that we've aspired to achieve. I'll give you guys a bit of insight here, which is quite interesting because I've just spent a week in the US last week. And when we talk about the regulations in the US, again, there's this misconception that this is an EU thing and it doesn't matter to them. But 9 of the top 10 retailers in the US actually sell into the Eurozone. So yes, it is a problem for them too. That's the first thing worth noting. The other thing is that actually to import garments now into the US, they've got such stringent regulations around the traceability that needs to be declared. It's pretty much a very similar data set to what we're capturing and publishing in the DPP. And that's why it's so important to focus on the compliant catalogue versus the passport, because the catalogue actually solves for many issues globally and many reports and regulations, because there's only so many data points you can have for any given product. What we've tried to do is preempt and provision for as many as possible, but of course map to the right utilities and regulations. And so if you were a British brand that was selling into the US, then your compliant catalogue should be solving to that too, not just a DPP. And it should be done in a trusted and automated way to make sure that you're not doing duplication, because this is a lot of pressure that's coming through for brands and retailers. And this is a new requirement. We've never needed to have this detail and scrutiny for our products, and certainly not required for reporting or publishing into the public domain. So the existing systems and solutions that we see are absolutely fit for purpose, but not for this. And that's why we wanted to create an isolated environment that can be specific to these needs. We calculate the environmental impact. I think the easiest way to understand this impact from a consumer perspective is ultimately the passports. The objective of the EU is that consumers can make informed buying decisions. Think of it like food nutrition information, right? 20 years ago, we used to go in and buy a sandwich, and if it tasted good, we were happy. Now we look at the carbs and the sugars and the calories, and all of that information dictates our buying decision. And they basically want to replicate that for general merchandise, for consumer products. So that if we're looking at the same T-shirt, same quality, same price, and one has a better environmental impact than the other, then naturally I'd like to think all of us will gravitate to the better product. Today, we don't have that information at hand. And so we're still making decisions based on style and value and price. And I don't think that's going to change for sure. But if we had a third data point, which was the environmental impact, and we were presented a way of being able to shop more responsibly, I do believe this will start to change our buying decisions, and it will start to influence us more positively in the way that we shop. Now, interestingly, having worked with some of the largest retailers over the last few years, I've also seen these big retailers take a very different and interesting position in the way that they are already rationalizing their own supply base to make sure that their suppliers are up to speed, best in class, and trusted to give them the level of information that they're going to need to meet the regulations, especially the big public limited companies who are going to be exposed naturally, given the public scrutiny and their shareholders. They're going to need to adhere and definitely try and mitigate risk against some potentially very big fines, given the scale of their businesses. So there's a whole load of things that are already happening and have been happening for 3 years. And the regulations, by putting the stake in the ground, is already driving that behavior. I think the last stakeholder to really shift will be the consumer. And that's because we will, at some given point in the very near future, start to have this information, and we'll be educated by the brands and by multiple different sources what it means. Now, what we've done here is we provision for the carbon, the water, and more recently we've added fossil resource fuel and the freshwater eutrophication. Please don't ask me what those two are. Esme in the chat will definitely be able to add a bit of colour. I'm still being taught. But I think what's really important to understand is all of these data points have to be aggregated and trusted. We've worked here with Fairly Made, who helped us calculate and achieve that, working closely with our suppliers and supply base. And then at Fabacus, our role was simply to bring it in and structure it so that it could be published to the passport. But these are all different swim lanes within your business that are going to need to be attended to, and they're going to be important. They all play different roles in what they will do. But ultimately, taking accountability as a brand of your total environmental impact will become a KPI that will start to drive change in the way that you're procuring and sourcing product, different materials, and what you're developing and where you're sourcing from, because every element of that plays a role in your environmental impact. So that's just worth consideration. We talk about the packaging here in the passport. We've got much more data around packaging in the compliant catalogue. That's primarily to solve for EPR, but here we just talk about the fact that it's recycled or recyclable, and a little bit of information we believe that the consumer may want to know. Just going back to the environmental impact for a moment, something else worth noting is that we're currently in a world where environmental impact doesn't feature in our reporting, but one of the regulations that are coming through is the Due Diligence Directive, the DDD. That's also going to be pressure on brands and retailers. And that's the legislative framework around the integrity of what's being reported at company level. So if you think about what the EU have tried to achieve, they're not only trying to get brands to implement DPPs, but they're also holding them very accountable in the integrity of what's being reported to sort of prevent people from just doing a bit of a data dump without any recourse. So that's also worth considering too. Care instructions, of course, we're all familiar with the traditional washing instructions, but this is an opportunity for the brand to give consumers all sorts of advice around extending the life cycle of the product, extending the durability where possible. And we actually got the durability data that we want to start including in DPPs. We believe it will feature in the DPP requirements, but we're waiting to see what happens next month. And so this is an ever-growing list of information that will need to be ultimately brought into the passport. I'm not going to bore you with this detail. This is the sort of data model structure. We obviously create our own identifiers. We align with the global standards body, so we create a GS1 digital link. GS1 are the global standards body for issuing barcodes, basically, for all consumer products. And then we've got a whole load of information in there that is very valuable to have holistically at brand level, country of origins, so you can start to do some real risk analysis on impacted regions. We do include tariff codes, and we do also have verified IP. So if it's a licensed consumer product, then the licensor, the IP owner, can also verify that you are officially permitted to use that IP for that product. And that's something that's important. And of course, circularity, right? So passports become the carrier to enable the afterlife, because at product level, you've got this unique identifier. Consumers will want to know how they can either dispose or recycle of the product appropriately. And of course, at Nobody's Child, we've worked with a whole load of partners around repair, rental, resale, and we've got a few more exciting developments and discussions underway. And we're constantly giving our consumers the opportunity and the platform to be able to do whatever they believe is responsible that suits their needs too. And this again will be an ever-growing list of opportunities and options for our consumers. And lastly, we talk about compliance, we talk about DPP, we talk about the EU's objectives. And so this is always seen through the lens of a regulatory requirement that's becoming mandatory. But the biggest miss for me is just how powerful a commercial opportunity this is. So what we've identified is we hijack the passport to include a gift, an experience for our customers. So we give them a reward or an incentive for engaging with the passport and registering their data. And obviously, I don't know all of our customers. We have a good handle on it, and we have about 65-70% of our transactions are on our own website. But of course, the other 30% are through partners, and we've got an extensive partner network of other retail channels. I don't necessarily know those customers that are buying my product and like my brand. So I'd love to speak to them. I'd like to look after them. I'd like to reward loyalty. This is an amazing opportunity for me at product level to engage and speak to my customers. And in return, I deliver them an experience, and I can capture their first party data to communicate directly with them with their consent. And of course, by being able to do that, what we're really unlocking here is a customer acquisition tool. Now, if you start to quantify that, and we've got a little bit of data to follow in a moment, that starts to give you a very demonstrable return on investment for what's ordinarily perceived as a regulatory requirement. Now, I will caveat that with we've also seen returning customers increase. We've seen customers buying more. We've seen basket value grow. We've seen customers go into stores to ask about the DPPs just to scan them because they've heard of them. We know that people are socializing DPPs because they've experienced it and they want to share it with friends. And so there's a whole load of benefits associated with genuinely, as a brand, authentically positioning yourself for real transparency to build real loyalty with your customers and real trust. And as a brand, of course, we take a lot of pride in it. It's been part of our DNA from day one, but it's been incredible to see how well received this has become. We also introduced referral, so another way of incentivizing our customers once they engage with a passport to also refer that to friends through their social networks. That's a very new introduction for us, but we're intrigued to see just how well that performs over the coming weeks and months. A little bit of data here that we extracted from one of our more recent presentations, just to demonstrate the journey we've been on, the sort of scale in which even nobody's child in our infancy, whilst we're very proud of where we are, we appreciate that we're still a growing brand, but it's a very complex and scalable challenge that no doubt Esme and the team can add a bit of colour on how tough it's been in getting all of that coordinated to bring us to where we are today. A quick overview of the campaign. I mean, these numbers are a little bit dated now, but it gives you an indication of scale. If my customer acquisition is north of £20 and I've got 12,500 customers that have registered their first party data through DPPs, that's immediately £250,000 return on investment. So just to reiterate, we've covered everything through the lens of compliance, regulation, and why DPPs matter. And now the point I really want to summarize with is that DPP is actually an incredible commercial opportunity for brands that embrace it early. Now, we've had a particularly lovely halo effect as one of the first movers in the public domain and the press. And of course, the fact that we're really pushing the envelope has been lovely. Things like this, I don't take lightly. These opportunities to speak to professionals and consumers of our brand, to really evangelize why we do this and what it means to us. And the fact that it commercially delivers an ROI makes all of the effort incredibly worthwhile. And I just want to make sure that you guys truly understand that's coming from a place where we've gone through the pain and we're now reaping some of those rewards, rightly so, because the team's worked so hard to get us to this point. But it's a journey I strongly encourage everybody to embark on as soon as possible. There is an experience here. Feel free, please, to scan it. It should take you to our latest DPP. But that's it from me from a presentation standpoint. Forgive me, I hate talking at people. I feel like I've been talking at you all for half an hour. I'm much more fun when we can engage and I can answer questions. So at that point, I'm going to stop sharing my presentation and I'm going to be at your mercy to try and add some color. But if it gets too technical, I'm obviously going to call on my experts.
Brilliant. I just love the fact that you demonstrated at the end. I think a lot of people I know before they were coming to this were that kind of feeling of dread of, oh my God, this is more red tape and more admin. The fact that you really demonstrated how it's adding a return on investment to the business. And I think particularly for the sorts of businesses that I know that are here, because the majority of them do make in the UK, they really value the provenance of their supply chain. I think you've really got to look at this as a definitely a benefit, which is brilliant. Your team have been great at answering questions. There's loads of stuff flying through here. I've been trying to kind of keep up and work out what hasn't been answered. I think the big thing there's a couple of things that are getting asked here that maybe be good to just explain is that about the tiers and the raw materials tier, because more and more brands are trying to use dead stock materials, or maybe not through the traditional large mill from Europe or something. So any advice as to what information and how they can get their information?
Well, they're two separate questions. I think the first thing to address is that before everyone panics, I think the EU recognise that this is a heavy lift. They also recognise that this is a journey. So I don't think they're asking for a sort of cliff edge, immediate, everything must be available. They've been pretty clear in sort of gravitating to tier one and tier two. That's the most important thing for them. I just think that always have in the back of our minds that this is an ever-growing regulatory requirement, and inevitably over time, I don't know whether that's 3 months, 3 years, or more, we're going to have to know everything about our products, right? I mean, we're seeing this unfold across different categories, from home to furniture to beauty. Of course, food has been traceability, in food has been fundamental forever because of the obvious recourse of getting that wrong. The same as pharmaceuticals, and general merchandise is different, but the framework philosophically is the same. So I think the more you can achieve, the faster, the better. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to publish it all into the public domain. And until the regulatory is defined, which is all currently scheduled for next month, that was pushed back 3 months. It was supposed to happen just before Christmas. Then we'll have a better indication of exactly what it is they're asking from us. But the big thing for me is, in a world where, especially made British, right? There's something still very special about that. We've seen different markets love British heritage brands. If you're making stuff here and you can shout about it with the right pride and the right confidence in your working practices, I think that's such an incredible opportunity. As a brand, we would love to continue making stuff in the UK. I had a factory in London for best part of most of our lives growing up. We were raised under cutting tables in my mum's factory in North London, and then sort of a surreal moment when we reopened the factory again in North London about 10 years ago. I wish we had that capability with confidence. It's just not viable for the price points and or the quality we're trying to achieve at Nobody's Child today. But we did so very successfully for a lot of the high street. If you guys have that opportunity, it's an incredible carrier to tell that story.
Maybe never say never, about bringing it back to the
No,
UK.
definitely not. No, I know. I totally. No, we would never dismiss it, but unfortunately, the maths just make it a bit harder for us, given the nature of where we are today. But that's obviously an evolving story.
Yeah, brilliant. I know there's a few questions in here because there's people here maybe that are making things out of leather, so bags, footwear in particular, which is kind of complex with all its different components. Is this, when you say textiles and apparel, do they, like for you, for Nobody's Child, any accessories that you do you still have the DPPs on them? I presume you do.
Yeah, I think that's definitely featuring. When and where, I'll defer to my team, but there is definitely, it's textiles in general. So I think upholstery as well for furniture, everything will fall into that bracket, and I suspect accessories the same, right? I mean, accessories and footwear for Nobody's Child is still very nascent. I mean, it's actually been a really nice success in terms of what we've developed, but we're still very much, these are new categories for us. So they will feature more heavily later in the year. But we treat every product through the lens of absolutely establishing a DPP for them today. And we do believe that they will feature as part of the textiles sort of overhang.
Yeah, right. Okay, brilliant. That's clear. There's a question here from Sherry, which is a good one. It's great to see a circular ecosystem being incorporated into the DPP, like repairs. How do you see an opportunity for the DPP to facilitate the new circular business models and to mainstream repair?
Absolutely. I mean, that was one of its primary objectives is obviously making enabling consumers to make informed buying decisions, but ultimately creating the rails for the circular economy, if you like. And yeah, I mean, it's there's a load of things that still need consideration, right? Today we use QR codes. We've dabbled with NFC, RFID. Unfortunately, still can't be read by handheld devices, although there's a load of noise to suggest that smartphones will be able to read RFIDs in the very near future. And so you've got different brands using different carriers for different information. And if you think about circularity at scale, if you dump 10,000 units on somebody, you need an army to process that and get it back in any sort of palatable time frame. And there are some really good people doing some really good stuff. I would just say that it's still very much in its infancy. Our partners are great, and we've spent a lot of time with our partners trying to help them close that feedback loop so that we can become better at what we do and don't do. But it does feel still a little bit early to make a call on what that direction of travel is going to be like. But one thing for sure, it's going to absolutely feature heavily.
Yeah, definitely. The fact that the QR code has to be specific to a product, which I think is what one of your team has confirmed in the chat, for
Yeah.
those businesses and more businesses these days are trying to make things in smaller batches, that is potentially going to cause an issue, I think, because if you have to print up a label for a batch of 10 products and it's gonna you're spending just as much money on labeling. Can you see any way round that? I know I think we've actually got a couple of label manufacturers even in the chat there, so maybe they can offer us a solution for this. But what do you think?
No, I think serialization will be here to stay. I think that if you really think about what the DPP is going to try and achieve, unfortunately, it has to be a unique identifier for every unique product so that we can really track the sort of post life when it exchanges possession. There's things around authenticity. There's a lot of different people doing different things with what that carrier can do. Now, there's a whole load of other things happening at the same time. Barcodes are evolving to QR codes. That's becoming mandatory. GS1 are leading that over the next couple of years. You're going to see that happen more and more. So the traditional sort of 2D barcode is going to gently disappear and it's going to be replaced by these unique codes. Those codes arguably can become the carriers for DPPs. So what everyone should be doing, they're not quite there, but there's certainly a common goal is to get it so that we've got one carrier on a product that does a whole host of things. One is to serve DPP, the other is to serve point of sale when it's scanned, the other is to serve consumers that want to engage with it and do something with it post purchase. I don't think there's going to be much wiggle room on serialization. It may feature slightly later. They may be a bit more lenient with it. We're waiting to see what happens next month, but we believe it's here to stay. But that's just a subjective and it's an opinion. But all of the noise and all of the sort of objectives point to a unique code on every product. Now, the good news is, I mean, we use woven labels, a traditional wash care label, which is, I don't know, don't quote me on this, I think it's about £15 per thousand last time I checked. I'm sure that's a lot more now because I'm getting on a bit. But that cost is still negligible at unit level. Now, of course, there's minimum batches, minimum runs, whether the label vendor themselves can do serialization, that's a capability challenge, but there are certainly vendors out there that are able to do small runs and serialization, and you can even do it in the form of, the one thing that hasn't been absolutely confirmed is the objective of the carrier is that it's on the product for the entire life of that product. But that's very, very tough, right? Even a traditional woven wash care will eventually wear out. So I don't see quite how they're going to solve for that yet. But we're just trying to be best in class with what we know until some of that information is evolved and really matured.
Yeah, that makes sense because yeah, of course, labels, even woven labels, they don't last forever. Plus, sometimes people just want to cut them out because they don't want them sticking out. I mean, someone said
Of
here as
course.
well, how do you attach a label to a sock?
Yeah.
No one's going to keep that in. So, one thing that again that's been highlighted here, as with anything, if you've just demonstrated what the benefits can be of having these passports, what's to stop the usual cowboys jumping onto it? Either, I can't remember, someone said there's a name for kind of hijacking a QR code, or just putting in false information. Like, how is it going to be policed, and how is it going to stop? Just like people will put made in UK on something when they've just sewn the label into something. What's
Of
going to stop
course.
all that happening?
Yeah, well, there's a combination of things happening, right? So in the first instance, having a carrier and publishing any information, right? Let's just ignore the integrity of that information for a moment. That's an infrastructure play. That's something that people will need to get familiar with doing and implementing. Once we've achieved that, then it's about how much do we trust the information that is being published. And that's where the regulators start to talk about the different data points, what's verified, what can be trusted, what's the source. That then there's a whole load of sort of regulatory, if you like, guidelines into what that will look and feel like. And then there's the overarching, the due diligence directive, which holds you accountable. Now, let's just be clear. I mean, we're talking about potentially 10% of turnover fines is what's being threatened. So yes, if people want to take the risk of publishing information that is not accurate, not verifiable, and cannot be justified, that will cover recourse. Now, the risk-free reward is at their discretion. Every business is different, and desperate times, unfortunately, call for desperate measures. So we've seen many, many times over the years, different actors do different things. But what I would say here, in the defense of the EU, and I'm not here to defend them, this has been a very considered strategy around how they drive accountability and governance by the brands to really inform consumers to make better decisions. And so everything is open for abuse, but at least it will be very obvious that it's deliberate abuse. And therefore, I suspect the recourse will be a lot stronger than some of the more traditional regulatory requirements.
Yeah, because if someone put on a UK factory and said it on their passport and said, I'm making here, and then you ask the factory and they said, hey, we've never made that garment, then it's going to soon cause a backlash, isn't it? So I think,
Yeah,
yeah,
for sure. I think, like always, these regulators will probably gravitate to the biggest first because that's where their biggest findings will be. That's where most of the risk they will perceive to be. But yeah, I mean, of course, there's going to be bad players, right? We get it everywhere in every shape or form. But this is definitely going to be, if you think about listing products. So if you're going to list your products on marketplaces, there is a whole regulatory framework around marketplaces in making sure that what they sell, they can also stand by the data that they've been given. So if you think about the recourse for a brand potentially being blackballed or blacklisted from marketplaces or blocked and fines, it's going to take a pretty persistent and I suspect nascent player to want to keep bypassing the rules, but that's going to have a shelf life. I mean, there'll be people doing it for sure, but if you're serious about building a brand with integrity and building it of any sort of scale, then you're going to need to conform.
yeah, totally agree. Right, what else have we got in? I'm conscious we've got about 10 minutes left. Got a lot more questions. Let me see if there's anything here that's a kind of general twin. Your team, by the way, have been amazing asking questions. Gwen, you've got your hand up. Do you want to unmute then? Come on, let me unmute you.
Thank you. I thought it'd be easier to ask the question than try and write it. So I'm really impressed by what you've made. As someone who's a manufacturing background myself and as a manufacturing engineering technician, my primary interest is this primarily your software for fabrics, and will it be expanding in the future to cover other products? Because it's a really well thought out pipeline. But I'm particularly thinking about toys. I found it really interesting what you were saying about tracking that pipeline. And I think the transparency is going to be super useful in the future. But I was wondering, is there any provision for that, or is this purely for fabrics?
No, great question. I mean, we absolutely are product agnostic today. If you think about when I started the presentation, I talked about licensing as a sector that we focused on.
Yeah.
I didn't elaborate there, but the double-edged sword of licensing is, whilst it was a huge opportunity, the thing that we recognized very early on is that it goes across product categories. So if you're a licensor, I'll give you a real example, given we're talking about toys. Hasbro are an IP owner, so they own things like the Transformers movie, and they license it out to hundreds of partners around the world to make Transformers t-shirts, etc. When it comes to toys, sometimes they license out their IP to third-party toy manufacturers, but they're better known as a vertical toy manufacturer themselves. And toys also features in the roadmap for the regulations for DPP. Now, from a software perspective, I don't care if it's a t-shirt or a fridge freezer. We have to accommodate any product, and it's a dynamic data model that is then obviously built around the category, whether it's home, beauty, apparel, whatever it is. We accommodate all of it. So we're already working with a couple of really big toy manufacturers, and as a licensing software, we actually have to work with all the licensing toy manufacturers. So yeah, we know that incredibly well, and we've got a couple of very early DPPs already under development for that category too. So yeah, we're more than happy to try and support. But philosophically, as you rightly identified, it applies to anything. The process and the technology that is required, it is absolutely relevant everywhere. The attributes, however, vary from category to category, of course, but accommodating that is the easy part.
My other question is, who is this on the onus of? Is it on the onus of the manufacturer to be filling out this information, or is it on the person who's selling it directly to the consumer? So I know sometimes when we're looking at regulatory, so is it, if I'm selling, who is the person who's meant to be filling out the product passport, if that makes sense? Who is it the responsibility of?
I think ultimately the person selling it, they talk about it being the manufacturer, and I think that's correct. And Jamie can add a bit of colour, because we've had this debate in a couple of areas, and I'll elaborate where and why. So if you've got a manufacturer that's just distributing through retail channels, that's one thing. So they can produce their own DPP with confidence, put it in their products, and it can be sold by anybody. But the person selling to the consumer must also make that information available. So if you're buying it online, you will need to have visibility or access to the DPP in due course. And so that's another element. And at that point, who becomes responsible for it, we believe still the manufacturer. Now, if it's a licensed product, so if you walk into Primark today and pick up a Disney t-shirt and you scan it, and that has all been aggregated, structured, and the DPP has been put on by Primark, but the licensor is completely detached from that process, we allow the licensor on our platform to verify that that is correct and it's an official licensed product. That's another outlier. So there's 3 or 4 different nuances around the nature of the product and how it gets to market, but there is a framework around anybody selling to the consumer must make that information available, and naturally anybody who's responsible for producing it and distributing it will need to make sure that all of their information is also accessible through the DPP. So it's still a bit of a moving target, but both people will be ultimately responsible. Brilliant. By the way, I can see my camera zooming in and out. I don't know what it's doing. No idea. It's not me trying to dance. It's just happening. But I'll just try and keep still. I don't know why it's zooming in. Sorry.
There's a lot of questions here that are specific to people's businesses. So I know we're going to run out of time, Andrew. What is the best way that people can contact you and particularly the Fabacus team? Firstly, if they've got any more questions following on from this. And secondly, if they want to sign up to use Fabacus. What's the best way of them to get in touch?
Well, I mean, just contact us through our website. Obviously, the team will pick that up. Obviously, reach out to me. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. And one thing more so, I mean, just to be absolutely clear, this you know, we want to be careful we don't bite off more than we can chew. We've been in a very privileged position to engage some of the biggest retailers as our early adopters, but there was logic to that. It's because I want to really tackle the problem where 80% lies, which is in the value and scale. But more importantly, we want to be helpful, right? Jamie and Wad from my team here are both members of the Surpass groups, which is the sort of steering committees around DPP that are being developed by the EU. We're part of JRC and other movements. So we're very much in the weeds. And of course, Esme and Philly at NC live it and breathe it every day as a brand. So if any of my team can ever be helpful in any shape or form, then I'm pretty sure they'll be forthcoming. So feel free to drop us a line, ask some questions, connect with the team. They're all very passionate about what we do, and that makes life a lot easier for all of us. And so, yeah, we want to be helpful first. Now, if it transpires that you have a problem that we could solve as a technology vendor, then of course we can have that conversation too. But in the first instance, whilst you're on the education curve, I suspect having access to people that have lived through it and know what they're doing is probably the most valuable. So that you can reach out to us any form that you think, LinkedIn, email, pigeon, whatever suits, please feel free.
That's amazing. There's nearly 100 people on this call right now, plus the other 100 or so that are going to watch the replay, Andrew. So your inbox on LinkedIn may get bombarded. So
That's all right. That's fine. It'll be a pleasure.
Amazing.
If it takes a bit of time getting back, forgive me, but I do get back. Nothing gets through the net, so it'll be a pleasure.
Great. One final question here that's kind of relevant for that then. Someone said, is there a simple overview on how Fabacus engages commercially with someone who wants to generate their own DPP across a product range?
Yeah, I mean, we focus on the big enterprise clients first, but very much through the lens of working with anybody. So we have created a light version for working with smaller, more independent, more agile, and more prepared brands. So we first need to have a conversation, understand where you are, what your needs are, and then obviously our job is to try and make it as scalable, feasible as possible. So I think the easiest way is just to reach out, have a conversation. Jamie and Ali on the team are great, and they will happily have a conversation with anybody to establish whether we can be helpful.
Amazing. In fact, they've just put their email addresses in the chat, jamie.beck@fabacus.com. That's Fabacus, Fabacus, and alexandra.wilson@fabacus.com. Amazing. Thank you all so much. Thank you, Andrew. I mean,
it's a pleasure.
really
Thank you for having me.
Information that you've given. It's fantastic. I'm going to have to watch it all back again, I think, to take it all in myself. And there will be a replay going out to everyone. So Andrew on LinkedIn, you're just Andrew Xeni, aren't you? Zeni.
Yeah, Xeni. So that's
yes.
Thankfully there's not a lot of us, so I'm pretty easy to find. So please do reach out, connect. If I can be helpful, it'd be a pleasure.
Brilliant. And there's probably some of the useful things that your team answered in the chat here. So when I do send out the replay, we can put some of those answers as well. Maybe I can compile a document which is most commonly asked questions, and I'll run it by you, Andrew, before I send it. But yeah,
of course. Yeah, the team will look over it. We do a little bit of a FAQs on the back of this. It'd be helpful for both of us. Thank you.
Amazing. Right. Thank you very much, everyone, for coming.
Well, thanks again,
Andrew and team. And I'll let you all crack on with your day. I can see the chat's going mad with everyone saying thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you.
I know you're so busy.
That's a pleasure. I've really enjoyed it, and I hope it was useful.
It was fantastic. Really useful.
Thanks again, Kate. Thanks, everybody.
Cheers.
Take care.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.